I've been a family doctor for over 15 years. I've helped couples navigate fertility treatments, held hands through cancer diagnoses, and once removed a Lego from someone's ear while he tried to propose. True story. But nothing prepared me for the day a man told me his wife gave him chlamydia because she might have caught it from a koala in Australia. I wish I were joking. He said it with a straight face. She sat beside him, wide-eyed, silent, like she'd just been hit by a truck of confusion and shame. And I realized, this wasn't a medical mystery. This was emotional gaslighting wrapped in a lab coat of denial. Over the next few minutes, I'll take you inside the weirdest, most heartbreaking appointment of my year, where love turned into blame, where science met suspicion, and where I found out the patient lying most was the one who'd been positive for 4 months. And if you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do, especially in a relationship where you deserved trust, you're not alone. Everyone has a story, and maybe yours deserves to be heard. Share your anonymous story through the pinned link in the comments. We'll tell it with care, humor, and truth. For every 1,000 views, we donate $1 to nonprofits supporting people recovering from emotional abuse and stigma. Because the truth deserves a voice. And sometimes, the diagnosis isn't in the body, it's in the behavior. He walked in first, red-faced, pacing slightly, like someone preparing to make a confession at church. She followed close behind. No tears, no mascara smudges, just that quiet grip on her purse you only see in waiting rooms and war zones. They sat down across from me. As a doctor, I've learned to read body language better than most therapists. And this wasn't the body language of two people facing a problem together. It was a standoff disguised as an appointment. I took a breath, smiled, and asked what brought them in. And that's when he said it. I tested positive for chlamydia, but I think it might have come from the koala photo shoot we did in Australia. Dead serious, not a hint of sarcasm. I blinked. Now, I've heard some creative STD explanations in my day. Gym towels, public hot tubs, the backseat of a borrowed Prius. But this was the first time marsupials were involved. She said nothing, just kept her eyes on the floor like she was trying to disappear into the laminate tiles. In that moment, I didn't need a test result. I needed a time machine to take her back to before this marriage turned into a courtroom drama starring a very confused koala. But I stayed calm, because science may not lie, but people definitely do. And the truth, well, it was just starting to unravel. I had to bite the inside of my cheek not to laugh. Not because STDs are funny, they're not, but because this man truly believed he caught one from a koala hug. That was new. That was creative. So I nodded like I was on Shark Tank, letting him pitch. Then I gently explained. Yes, koalas can carry chlamydia, but the strain they carry, Chlamydia pecorum, is completely different from the strain that affects humans. It's species-specific. Think of it like 2 apps with the same name, but one only works on Android and the other only crashes on iPhones. He blinked. So, you're saying the koala didn't give me this? No. Unless you and the koala shared more than a photo op, and I highly doubt that, the marsupial is innocent. His wife let out a breath. Not a laugh, not a sob, just that tight exhale people do when their world starts making cruel, disappointing sense. Science, in that moment, wasn't just about bacteria. It was about boundaries, and about no longer letting someone hide behind fuzzy distractions and tourist excuses. Because this wasn't about wildlife. This was about wild lies. And I knew the real story was still sitting in his medical file, waiting for me to open it. She didn't yell. She didn't even flinch. She just turned her head, looked at him, then looked at me, with this quiet expression that said, Am I losing my mind? Or did this man just blame an Australian marsupial for cheating on me? And that moment? That was the most painful thing in the room. Not the bacteria, not the excuse, but the realization in her eyes that she was the last to know in a story she was living. That's when I stopped thinking of her as a patient spouse and started seeing her as someone whose dignity had been quietly chipped away. One awkward silence, one deflection, one "you're overthinking it" at a time. I've seen hundreds of faces across this desk, but hers? It was the kind that sticks, because confusion isn't just a symptom. Sometimes it's a diagnosis. A diagnosis of betrayal, of gaslighting, of a trust that's been running a fever for months and no one thought to take its temperature. And while she sat there, clutching her purse like a life raft, I realized this wasn't going to be a medical session. It was about to become a reckoning. Some people lie to get out of trouble. Others build entire fantasy worlds where the laws of biology bend and personal responsibility is just optional. This man didn't just dodge the truth, he invented a plot, complete with an exotic setting, a marsupial co-star, and a villain conveniently not named himself. And the worst part? He didn't just lie to his wife. He made her sit front row for the performance, as if her confusion, her pain, her silence were all just part of the act. I've seen shame do strange things to people, but this wasn't shame. This was storytelling used as camouflage to avoid the mirror, to skip the apology, to rewrite the script before anyone else could see the real scene. Because when guilt feels too heavy, some people would rather wear a costume than carry the weight. But sooner or later, the audience catches on. And in that room, she already had. I opened his chart. There it was, plain as day. Chlamydia diagnosis, dated 4 months ago, filed by a urology clinic across town. No koalas, no wildlife tours, no cuddly contamination. Just a routine screening, a prescription that was never picked up. And I'd bet a conversation that was never had. See, lab results don't care about shame. They don't bend for egos or excuses. They just sit there, quiet, factual, inconvenient. I looked back at the man across from me, still spinning his eucalyptus-scented fantasy, still trying to dodge a bullet he fired himself. In medicine, we talk a lot about evidence-based treatment. But sometimes the real disease isn't just what shows up on the test. It's the lengths someone will go to pretend they're still clean. And in this case, the numbers told the truth before he ever could. I sat up straighter. It's never easy, telling the truth that breaks one person's heart while peeling back another's lie. But this wasn't about comfort. It was about clarity. She sat there, eyes wide, but still. Like she'd already done the math, just needed someone to say the answer out loud. And him? He was already looking down. At his shoes, at the floor, anywhere but at her. I couldn't protect them from the fallout, but I could make sure the blast came from facts, not fiction. So I said, as gently as I could, "This isn't new, and it didn't come from your last vacation." Silence. But not the empty kind, the kind that weighs the air, presses behind your ribs. Because some truths hurt twice, once when you find them, and again when you realize someone else hid them from you. And no matter how careful you are with the words, the moment truth walks in, denial has to leave. You hear these stories and want to believe they're rare. But here's the thing. When someone lies, not just to their partner, but to themselves, it doesn't make the truth go away. It makes the wound go deeper. The way he dodged accountability? That wasn't about protecting the marriage. It was about protecting his ego. This wasn't just medical misinformation. This was emotional avoidance dressed up as concern. It was medical gaslighting, using confusion and shame to blur the facts. He didn't want to repair what was broken. He wanted her to feel like she broke it. And the worst part? He almost succeeded. Because when someone we love questions us, we don't always push back. Sometimes we pause, we doubt. We ask, did I miss something? Am I overreacting? Could it actually be the koala? But here's the truth. You can't heal what you hide, and you can't build trust on top of a lie. She sat quietly for a long time, not crying, not yelling, just still. Then she looked at me, and not at him, and said, "Thank you, doctor. Now I know the only thing that needs healing isn't the infection. It's how I've been living with the lie." It hit harder than any lab result I could ever show. Because the truth is, she didn't come to the clinic just for a diagnosis. She came for clarity, for someone to say out loud what she already suspected in silence. And when she got that truth, clear, unflinching, undeniable, she didn't fall apart. She stood up, straighter than before. Because sometimes the most painful clarity is also the most freeing. Some wounds aren't physical. They're emotional contortions we perform day after day to keep the peace, to keep pretending. But pretending isn't peace, and silence isn't love. She deserved the truth, not just about her body, but about her life. Doctors aren't always the ones who speak up. But sometimes, silence doesn't mean professionalism. It means complicity. And that day, in that exam room, I knew. If I didn't say it, no one would. Not because she couldn't see the truth, but because he was counting on her not to believe it. If you've ever been blamed for someone else's damage, if you've ever had to carry guilt that was never yours, you're not alone. You're not crazy. And you don't owe anyone your silence. Let's stop treating honesty like a luxury. Let's start naming what hurts so it can finally begin to heal. Have a story where someone made their mess your fault? Tell us anonymously using the link in the pinned comment. We'll turn your truth into a voice and donate $1 for every 1,000 views to health literacy and women's wellness programs. Because the truth shouldn't need a stethoscope to be heard. And your voice deserves more than whispers behind closed doors.